Little Jamaica, or Toronto, was the second largest producer of reggae music in the world, second only to Kingston, Jamaica.
In some ways, Canadian reggae was kind of like a secret.
It was popping in Toronto on a level that is not really shared properly by the city.
It was very perplexing to sort of see this huge scene not really get a lot of exposure.
Why wasn't this played on the radio? And then that gets into the brutal nature of the music business and systemic racism and the challenges for black artists in Canada in those days.
Bloodfire, you know, Truths and Rights.
Noel Ellis.
Leroy Sibbles.
Wayne McGee.
RZ Jackson.
Jackie Mittoo.
Over 100,000 Jamaicans immigrated here in the 60s and 70s.
You had a large, Jamaican, community migrating here looking for better opportunities, and with that came also reggae artists.
Jay Douglas.
The Sheiks. Jojo Bennett. Cougars. Earth, Roots and Water. One by one, people were catching wind in Jamaica that there was work here in Toronto for musicians. The amount of musical talent from the Caribbean in Toronto starting in the 1960s, it was an explosion.
There was this vibrant community that recorded records, sold records, distributed records, brought in records, all under the radar of most people in Toronto.
Jerry Brown, the owner of Summer Records, he would put Made in Jamaica on the label, even though it was recorded at his basement studio in Malton, Ontario.
It was so fluid. It might be a Canadian band, but a Jamaican artist, but produced in Canada, but released in Jamaica. It was such a conversation between the two cultures.
And so those artists, they came here and they set up record labels and they were recording their tracks here in Toronto, in Little Jamaica.
This was where like Bob Marley comes to town, like Peter Tosh comes to town, they go to Little Jamaica.
Reggae, it's part of the Toronto sound. I don't think people realize it. It was just like an incredible amount of music was made here and came through here.
It was concentrated mainly around Eglinton or Bathurst.
It happened on Eglinton.
Raps is a restaurant on Eglinton now, but before that, Raps is a record store. And the owner, Horace Rap Rose, is the brother of Michael Rose. Michael Rose, or was the lead singer for a very famous Jamaican reggae group called Black Uhuru in 1984. Black Uhuru won the first Reggae Grammy Award. And so he would come to Toronto regularly. So this led to him writing a song called The Youth of Eglinton. It's a song about the problems that young black youth face. He not only talks about Little Jamaica in Toronto, but the name of the song is named after Eglinton.
Little Jamaica as a hub started to grow as the people who had immigrated there saw that there was a need for them to consume goods and services, food, hair products that was accessible to them in the Caribbean and in Jamaica.
Since I moved to Toronto, I realized that there was this big black community that a lot of people call Little Jamaica. I came up there just looking for somewhere to get my hair cut, and what I found was like, okay, there's all these record stores, places like King Culture Records and Monica's and like all these great restaurants like Raps and Randy's.
On a Saturday, if you weren't in the barbershop by 12 p.m., you were not getting your hair cut for that day. That was the vibrancy and that was the energy of the community.
We set up barbershops, grocery stores, record stores. We held cultural events and dances. These places were like community centers. It was a way to kind of try to recreate some of the pleasures from home.
The pandemic has been a challenge for so many businesses, but in Little Jamaica, things have been particularly difficult.
The situation that the neighborhood's facing, there's a lot.
For 20 years, Fife has owned a beauty salon on Eglinton Avenue. She says her business took a big hit several years ago when construction began on the Crosstown LRT.
If you've known Eglinton before and you see it now, it's a huge contrast. Business owners already being in a state of vulnerability. You have barricades in front of businesses, completely blocking them in. You have heavy machinery, you have the road being detoured and reconfigured every few weeks. Businesses just being able to be accessible to customers, it's severely impacted. What the neighborhood has been facing is 10 years of LRT construction. The COVID-19 pandemic has kind of knocked down an already vulnerable area of the city.
Over time, you've seen over 140 businesses that have closed down on that Eglinton strip.
A place with this much history, a cultural hub that is primarily black, you would think the city of Toronto would want to hype that up more. But instead, it feels like it's just been buried under this construction for 10 years and they're hoping nobody notices, so it's just easier for developers to come in and build wherever they want.
Certainly about the gentrification, I think that's particularly difficult to talk about because you wonder if we're just going to be erased, and it's going to be part of everything else that, that has happened to us here.
I just don't want the neighborhood to be wiped out before the LRT gets there, because it's going to become this, everyone is going to want to live up there. It's going to become this super, emerging neighborhood, and the people who made the neighborhood what it is are going to be left out of that conversation. I think the neglect of Little Jamaica is equal to the neglect of the reggae scene here.
You have businesses that have set up shop there since the late 60s, early 70s, and they've become institutions that, generations have come and seen and have developed relationships with. What would happen if these businesses are ultimately displaced is the essence of the black community and the black presence will ultimately go with it. That falls into that pattern that we see being perpetuated throughout Canada's history of black people being displaced.
I think what we need is some kind of institution. We need a gallery, we need a museum, we need some kind of cultural center that everybody can have a sense of the beauty and the effervescence of what that was. Something that really is a repository for the history.
After all this is said and done, I'm hoping that Little Jamaica will continue to be a part of Toronto, 60, 100 years from now, for a community to be formed, staple black businesses to be thriving.
I want you to be able to look up and see a sign that says, "Welcome to Little Jamaica." I want to see, no buildings for lease. I want to see it not in disarray, and I want to see a lot of thriving black businesses there.